Welcome back. It's Mary Beth again, just tuning in to be with you guys as your class's book buddy as we continue exploring Willa of the Wood by Robert Beatty. We're going to pick up today at chapter 19 where we left off. In my copy, it starts on page 96, so get out your book so you can read along. Willa wanted to stay strong. She wanted to be brave, to stand up to him, but she couldn't keep her body from shaking. The menacing stare of the Pateran was too much to bear. "What have you done, Jader?" he asked her, his voice low and growling. She knew he was already aware of much of what she had done. He wanted her to explain herself, to beg him for forgiveness, but even lying on the floor before him, under the looming threat of his presence, she couldn't find the dark and murky pit in herself to say the words he wanted to hear. "I don't know why your guards brought me here," she said sullenly. "I am a loyal member of the clan." The crowd gasped at her insolence. Nothing but subservience and apology was ever allowed at the feet of the Pateran. Gretick darted in and jabbed her with a stick, outraged that she wasn't whimpering in submission. The whole room began to erupt, but the Pateran raised his open hand and closed his clawed fingers into a fist, bringing the room to immediate silence. The Pateran picked up his long steel spear in his right hand. The Jaders and the guards and everyone in the crowd had seen him use the spear of power many times to kill the Farron who had committed crimes or gone against the will of the clan. The Pateran's spear was the only metal allowed in Dead Hollow other than what the Jaders brought back in their satchels, and each Jader must always be given to the Pateran the moment the Jader returns. Still holding his spear, the Pateran peered down at Willa, lying on the floor in front of him. "I will tell you why you are here," he said, his voice filled with dark and scathing tone, his eyes flicking out across the watching crowd. "Last night you crept past the Watcher. The Watcher sees all, and so do I. Not only did you leave the lair without my instruction or my permission, you left without the other Jaders. You went out thieving on your own." The Pateran's eyes shifted back and forth across the faces of the crowd, guarding their reaction as he spoke. "And when you finally returned, you slid back into the lair like a rat without making yourself known to me or my guards. You entered places in the lair that you knew you were not allowed, and you did things you knew were wrong." By the time he came to the last of her crimes, the voice had become a vicious roar. "What is the meaning of this behavior, Jader?" The walls of the hall seemed to vibrate with the power of his voice, and the people hunkered down in fear. Willa wanted to scream up at him that she'd been hurt and needed his help, but she knew he wouldn't care, and if he found out that she'd been shot by a homesteader, it would make him even angrier. She could hear the murmurs of hostility towards her spreading through the crowd, and the Pateran seemed to sense it too. He leaned down towards her and shouted, "This is your clan, Jader. These are your people. Everything you do must be for the others. Do you understand the harm you cause them when you split away from me and the other members of the clan? When you do these things on your own? The members of the clan must stick together. We must fight for each other, care for each other. There is no I, only we." As he said these words, his voice soared and his skin glistened, and the people looked up at him with adoration in their eyes. When he rose once again to his full height and stepped towards her with a spear in his hand, the swarm of the crowd shrunk back in fear. The Jaders cowered. Willa's heart pounded in her chest. He was going to thrust the point of the steel spear into her body at any moment. "Do you wish to die? Is that it?" he asked her. "And after all that you did wrong, you didn't come to me when you returned to the lair. You were pulled to my throne against your will by my guards, and you appear to have come empty-handed. You have nothing. You were a good Jader once, but now I see nothing before me but a creature without a clan." They were the harshest of words. A Farron without a clan did not survive. And the Patarian's words weren't just punishment or a reprimand, they were a threat. With the thrust of his spear, he could kill her, but with the roar of a command, he could cast her out, a fate that most Farron considered more cruel than death itself. "Do you wish to starve? Is that it?" he asked. "Do you wish to freeze alone in the cold?" he asked, raising his voice as the surrounding swarm hissed and jeered at her. "You're acting like a girl who doesn't understand the value of a clan that protects her." Seeing that there was no way for her to defend herself, Gredick rushed in and grabbed her satchel. He tried to yank it away, but she'd been expecting his attack. She leapt to her feet and clutched the satchel to her side. The Patarian stepped back to let the two Jaders fight it out, one against the other. But Gredick's brother Cedric charged in. He struck her so hard that she hit the floor, gasping for air, her ribs burning. Cedric ripped the satchel away from her hands and handed it to his brother. Gredick held the satchel up for all to see. "It feels very light," he shouted triumphantly at the crowd, hooted and hollered in return. They'd been watching the rivalry between the Jaders for years with all their tricks and takes, their rises and their falls. But as Gredick pawed through the satchel, it became clear by the grim expression on his face that something was wrong. "It can't be empty," he grumbled in confusion. "It can't be—" But then he hissed with pleasure. "The sneaky little beast has hidden something in a concealed pocket. She's trying to keep her take for herself. She's trying to steal from the clan." Then Gredick went silent. His expression changed. It was clear to everyone that he had discovered something in the satchel so deliciously wicked that even he couldn't believe his luck. He lifted 2 small brown coins above his head. "After all the trouble she's caused, all Willa got last night were these 2 copper pennies." He called out above the rising clamor of the crowd. 2 copper pennies, that's all she got." As Willa gathered herself slowly, painfully, up onto her knees and then up onto her feet, the Patarian moved towards her with his spear. Standing before him, she did not look away as others always did. She stared right back at him. "My name is Willa," she thought defiantly. But as the Patarian studied her, the malice in his expression slowly changed to something else, something more wary and uncertain than simple anger. And that was her only hope now. She had snuck into the homesteader's house and stolen his belongings to get the Patarian's attention, to earn his praise. But now that the sun had risen and the harsh light of the Patarian's gaze was on her, her heart pounded in her chest. Would there be praise or punishment? The bronze skin of the Patarian's face seemed to glimmer as he turned towards Cedric. He looked at the 2 pennies in Gredick's hands and then out at the crowd. And then finally his eyes came back to her. "Is this truly what you've brought me?" the Patarian asked. "You've been a strong and efficient Jader for this clan, quick of hand and deft of thought. But 2 nights ago you failed me with the empty satchel, and the night before that your satchel was light as well. And now this is your take you have brought to your Patarian?" Willa's eyes met him and his gaze as steady as she could, but she did not speak. "Answer me," he demanded in a growl. "Is this what you have brought me, Willa?" "No, my Patarian," Willa said finally, her soft tone and filled with respect, but then her voice took on a sharper edge. "This is what I brought for Gredick." Gredick hissed and moved towards her, but the Patarian pointed his clawed finger at the Jader. "You stay right there," he snarled, and Gredick stopped dead in his tracks, too frightened to move another step. When the Patarian looked at Willa, a knowing expression slowly inched across his face. "Gredick and the other Jaders have been stealing your take from you?" Willa nodded. "Yes, my Patarian. He got his 2 cents this time, just as I knew he would." "It's a lie!" Gredick screamed. "I bring home a good take every night. You know I do. The little beast is lying." "If I may, my Patarian," Willa said, "I would like your permission to walk over to that tree over there so that I can show you something." The Patarian glanced towards the woven stick column and then looked back at Willow, his eyes narrowing in curiosity. "You may go," he said. Willa noticed the Patarian's eyes shift across the room. She couldn't be sure, but it was almost as if he was trying to gauge the crowd's reaction to what was happening. She had noticed in the past that although he was the great leader of the clan, he seemed to live in worry of what his subjects were seeing when they looked at him, what they were thinking at that moment. As she walked over to the woven stick tree, she felt and heard the movement. The people in the crowd behind her realized there was actually an old woman lying on the floor at the base of the tree. "May I borrow your bag, grandmother?" Willow asked, using the most formal title she could for her mama, reminding people in a small, quiet way that she herself was just a girl with a grandmother and a clan, respectful of the old ways of her people. Willa knew from watching the Patarian that words had power, the power to persuade and the power to deceive. As her mama handed her the old tattered bag, she looked up at Willa and her eyes met. "Be careful, my child," she seemed to be saying. "Thank you, grandmother," Willa said. "What kind of trick is this?" Greta hissed in protest as Willa returned with her mama's medicine bag and set it before the throne. "I have brought this for you, my Patarian." "And what is it?" the Patarian asked. Taking that as her cue, Willa stepped forward and reached into the bag. "My Patarian, will you please?" she asked softly, and then, as the crowd looked on, Willa poured a waterfall of silver coins out of the bag into the Patarian's cupped hands. Greta writhed in anguish. "It's one of the little beast's dirty tricks." "You have done very well, little one," the Patarian said, using the term little one for Willa, as if she wasn't just a thieving jader, but once again a child of the clan, to be protected and honored. Words have power. Willa thought again. He knew it, and she knew it. "But this is not all, my Patarian," she said as she pulled wads of crumpled green bills from the bag and put them in his hands. The crowd erupted with pleasing sounds at the riches she had brought. Then she pulled out the Cherokee arrowheads, which were highly prized in the clan, for they could be used in the tips of their spears. "You have pleased the Patarian, my child," the god of the clan said as she filled the hands with treasure, the praise pouring out of him like poison from a festering wound. Willa could see her grandmother watching her and the Patarian with steady eyes, as if she was seeing the plot of a play unfold. "But that is not all," Willa said again, as she slowly pulled out the glittering silver jewelry she'd stolen from the man's lair and laid it in the Patarian's hands. His eyes widened and whispers of approval ran through the crowd. There was no doubt now it was a large and bountiful take, but it wasn't important just because the Patarian and his guards could sell and trade these goods for the benefit of the clan. It wasn't just about the money and the valuables. The size and tradition of a jader's take was a symbol of his or her loyalty to the Patarian, her embrace and acceptance of everything that held the clan together. But as the Patarian and the jaders and everyone in the crowd gazed upon her take with gleaming eyes, Willa felt a strange and lingering shame. So much had come to depend on her take each night, whether it was more than Greta's or less, whether the Patarian was pleased or angry, but deep down she couldn't help herself from wondering what difference it all made to her and her people and the forest in which they all lived. Greta groveled low to the floor as he crept towards the Patarian like a slithering creature. "You know I am your loyal servant, my Patarian." Willa watched as the Patarian's eyes slid reluctantly over to Greta. "You know you can trust me," Greta said. "Speak what's on your mind," the Patarian said gruffly. "What the little beast said isn't true. We haven't been stealing her take. She's been stealing ours. That take is ours to give to the Patarian. She stole it from us and hid it with the old witch. We all know the little beast is a wood witch too. She can't hide it." As the gang of jaders surrounded her and started to slow and steady hiss in unison with Greta's charges against her, Willa's heart began to sink. She knew that no matter what she said or did now, most of them were going to support Greta's claim against her. Willa glanced over at Gillen. Her friend's eyes blazed with anger at the way the jailers were turning on her. But when Gillen moved forward to stand in her defense, Kieran and the other jailers shoved her back. Willa looked over at her mama, but what could her mama do for her? How could she save her? The Patarian turned to Willa, his eyes moving from her streaked and spotted face to the leaf-colored skin of her arms and legs to her head of long, dark hair. Your fellow jailers have made a charge against you, the Patarian said. Can you prove that this was your take? Can you prove that you didn't steal this from Gredick? Willa met the eyes of the Patarian. She knew he was far smarter than the other people in the room, far smarter than even Gredick, and he already knew the answer to all of his questions. He knew this was her take. He knew she had tricked Gredick, but he wanted to watch her confront this new challenge. Willa held the Patarian's gaze in silence for several seconds, her chest tightening with frustration. Now, she had to prove it, not just venture down into the valley miles away and sneak into a killing man's lair, not just get shot and crawl back into Dead Hollow on her belly and fight and hide and blend and run. She felt it boiling up inside her. Now she had to prove it, prove that she had actually stolen these things, prove that she was loyal to the clan, prove that she was loyal to the Patarian. She looked at Gredick and the other jailers and out across the crowd of Farron, waiting for her answer. Then she looked over at her grandmother, who was watching her and the Patarian. Finally, she nodded. Yes, I think I can, she said. She lifted the bag and held it above her head. If what you say is true, Gredick, then I stole this take from you. Then you should have no trouble telling everyone here what remains inside this bag. She could see Gredick furiously trying to figure out what she was doing. She could see him trying to think it through. She had put so much treasure into the Patarian's hand. How could there possibly be more still in the bag? Gredick's face grimaced with uncertainty. It's another trick, he declared. You claim that it was your take, she said for all to hear. So, is there something still left in the bag, or is it empty now? We will stop there at the end of chapter 20, and next time we will join together to start at chapter 21. Look forward to seeing you then.